Apparently I've always been an eavesdropper, so right from when I was very little, my parents would always tell me to stop staring at people first of all, which you can sort of get away with when you're a toddler, but there comes a stage where you just can't stare anymore. In which case I would always try and strain my ear, and I'd pick up weird things like one of my mum's favourite expressions was, "Oh my giddy aunt." But I would always think, which aunt? Why was she so dizzy? So I remember really puzzling through that one. I remember my dad had a monkey wrench, and I just thought, why the monkey? I remember really puzzling over that one and thought maybe you had to really lean and stretch or hang from a ladder in order to use it. So I've been doing this all my life, just picking little bits up and playing around with them and wondering quite where they came from. Where does the word ruler come from? You know, the ruler that you mark lines with on your paper, and whether the Queen actually used one and that was why it was called a ruler. But by speaking of tribes, the book's called Dent's Modern Tribes, and I'm speaking anthropologically, so I'm not really talking about genes or race in the kind of old sense of the word, and talking much more about the passions that people have, the professions that bind them together, the sort of hobbies they pursue, anything that will make a little or a big indeed community. And so football fans are in there, undertakers, paramedics, secret agents, Freemasons, all people who are somehow part of a community. And of course it's not just one, because each and every one of us are members of lots of different tribes. And of all the characteristics that unite us, probably the most significant, certainly for me, will be language. And tribe talk has been with us for centuries, and I remember discovering and just relishing the fact that 200 or 300 years ago, highwaymen in the dead of night, if they bumped into each other and they were on their way to rob, to pull up a jack as they would call it, stopping a jack, if they bumped into somebody who they thought was a fellow highwayman, they would say, "The music's paid." The music's paid. That was their code to say, "I'm a fellow highwayman, don't stop me. I'm on my way to do my business." And if you're with lexicographers, you might freely talk about egg corns. These are sort of tribal footprints that you might find each and every single one of us. Have you heard of egg corns? Oh, egg corns is slightly slipped into the mainstream, but you can find whole websites dedicated to egg corns, and they are slips of the tongue that actually make perfect sense, so you don't always notice them, and sometimes those slips actually become the standard after many years, sometimes even centuries. So you might get somebody asking you to cut to the cheese. Quite a few people apparently online, if you Google it, you might find quite a few hits of cut to the cheese. People think it's the last course of a meal, so let's just get to the end. Cut to the cheese might make sense. Putting, what else we got? Going at it hammer and thongs. Like a bowl in a china shop, which again sort of makes sense. Putting the cat before the horse. So many examples like this, and I've got so many favourites, but there are many of them out there. But lexicographers will call them egg corns. That is our term, so if you ever hear dictionary makers talking about these, you will know that is our code. So those are just a few examples, I suppose, of my own tribal footprints, as I say, the sort of things that I might bandy about quite freely, that others might not understand, but in a way it doesn't really matter because it's my shorthand. But this book is all about me gathering information from other tribes. There were many surprises really in writing this book too, because Twitchers, I suppose I would expect a sort of niche vocabulary, probably not quite as aggressive as some of these Twitchers seem to be. Apparently British bird watchers are the most passionate, but also the most feisty in the entire bird watching world. Builders were a surprise to me. Builders also had the most fantastic vocabulary. So Gary Neville, for example, if you're a football fan, gets a frequent look in, because that's a slang term for a spirit level, which they also call a bubble. And they'll just say, "I'm spreading the fat on Lionel Richie," meaning I'm painting the ceiling. So that's Lionel Richie dancing on the ceiling, etc, etc. So you have to sort of make that connection to get there. But they freely swap this kind of banter around, and it's a real sort of community. Train spotters were fun too. I'm guessing if you work at Google, you're probably not a train spotter. Anybody? No. Although the demographic is changing a little bit. I did expect to find a devoted, history-steeped lexicon amongst cabbies, for example. Because take London's black cabbies, you know about their history. They talk about a life on the Hickory, that's the Dickory Dock, which is the meter. And they talk about all sorts of different kinds of punters. They talk about cock and hen, that is a male and female passenger. A single pin is a lone passenger. A golden roader is the dream ticket. That's somebody who's going on a long distance, and obviously lots of money for them. But the ultimate goal for the passenger at least, is a sherbet, and that's a cab, sherbet dab, that takes them on the cotton. And if they're on the cotton, that is the shortest possible distance between two routes. And cabby to cabby, they talk about lots of different landmarks in London, which were lovely, I thought. The gasworks, so the Houses of Parliament. The scent box was the rank at King's Cross, I think because it's rank, it's anything but well scented. The Broadcasting House is the tripe shop, which I loved. And all these are kind of swapped as readily really as tales of the evil bilker, and a bilker is a passenger who runs off without paying at all. So I expected to find that there. I also expected to find within the banter of football a really unique lexicon, and there too I really wasn't disappointed. You've got footballers, you've got the managers, you've got punters, and possibly one of the highlights of the book, if I've got any Arsenal fans here, was I didn't actually meet him, but I had an email exchange with Arsene Wenger about the post-match interview, and my big question to him was why, when managers are interviewed after a football game, why are they so boring? Why does everything they say sound completely cliched and predictable? And he said, it's true. It's totally true. Why do they want to speak to us? I don't know. But he said, you will never get anything unique from a football manager because we have to be incredibly guarded. We have to keep our cards close to our chest. And so we will never say anything new. But in all of these cases, and in those many other chapters in the book really, cabin crew, paramedics, truckers, who talk freely about sick horses and willy weavers. You have to look in the book to see what those are. Tribal conversations like these are a way of uniting its members. And there are other groups who also have this kind of banter, but there's another motive at play here as well, and that of course is secrecy. So that includes the Freemasons, but they are a good example of a tribe where actually secrecy is everything. And of course there are many more. There's the military, where operational codes are all important. Talk to people in the RAF, soldiers. But strangely, even amongst them, the best tribal language, the best jargon if you like, the most colourful, was all about life on the ground. One of their favourite terms is a jack brew, which we all now regularly use at home. And a jack brew is when somebody's made a cup of tea for themselves but not for other people. So you might overhear a policewoman talking about an obbo on a twocker, which is an observation on a carjacker, basically, somebody who's taken without consent. That's where twocker comes from. So she's kind of talking about that, which is all work related, but her partner in fighting crime might lament the quality of the job role in the nick. And the job role is the loo paper, basically, which is notoriously as rough as the criminals that they've just banged up in the nick. Really essential, vital, literally life-saving code, and that kind of banter is doctors and paramedics. Some of them are quite sweet. So a VIP is a very intoxicated person in A&E, which you will find a lot. Teeth, which means tried everything else, try homeopathy. They frequently complain about Dr. Google, the GPs, in their waiting room, because we are all, as they call, hypo-Google-chondriacs, like that. In other words, we look up on Google we look our symptoms up, and then we decide that we actually have a terminal illness. In my case, that happens quite regularly. If you do actually get ill and end up in hospital, the one thing not to celebrate is the doctor ordering some house red, because that actually means a blood transfusion, and you need that quite quickly. Meanwhile, as for paramedics, so they rely on this incredibly black humour, I mean really black humour. They discuss, for example, the level of death of a patient. So a patient isn't just dead, they are either dead or proper dead or dead. And all that reflects really the level to which they're kind of so far gone that they can't possibly be resuscitated. I think if there's anything I would say about tribal conversation, it's that it will just give you so much insight into the people that use it. And after this, I would love to hear a bit about the sort of jargon that you swap amongst yourselves, although I'm betting that you're probably giving the same answer as every single other tribe in this book, including lexicographers, which is when you say, what code do you use at work? You will say, we don't have one. And that everybody said that to me, because you're not actually aware half the time that you're using it. And as I always say, the best time to pick up tribal conversation is when it's not looking, which is where you come back to eavesdropping, where you come back to actually listening to people talk to each other and you say, well, hang on, what's that?